Okay, so you ready for this one? Millions spent by the government to, make mice transgender.
Oh, yeah, that's a headline that definitely grabs you.
Right. Like, I just knew we had to do a deep dive into this one for you all. Like, come on, how do you even resist that?
Yeah.
But
Well,
no.
especially when you think about where this is all coming from.
Yeah, where is this coming from?
Well, a speech by former President Trump.
Yeah.
And then you've got it spreading like wildfire in certain media. And then you've got Elon Musk's DOGE initiative even getting involved.
Oh, yeah, right. DOGE and their old expose government waste thing.
Mm.
But they've had a bit of a history of misinterpreting data, haven't they?
Well, that's
Like,
yeah, putting it mildly, I'd say.
yeah.
They've actually had to retract several bombshell reports they've had.
Really?
Yeah, because the numbers just straight up did not add up.
Right.
Like that time they claimed there was an $8 billion government contract,
Oh.
and it turned out to be $8 million.
Oh, wow.
Slight decimal point issue, you could say.
Oops.
Yeah.
Easy mistake.
Easy mistake.
But it makes you wonder about that fact-checking process, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
So let's unpack this claim about the transgender mice.
Oh, right.
What's the reality behind that?
Well, it seems like there's been a big misunderstanding
Mm-hmm.
or maybe, a purposeful misrepresentation of the science involved. The research they're referring to is actually using transgenic mice.
Oh, transgenic mice. Okay.
It is a completely different thing.
Okay. Transgenic mice, for those of us who don't speak fluent lab, what exactly does that mean?
Well, transgenic mice are basically lab mice that have been genetically modified.
Okay.
And this is a cornerstone of medical research.
Wow.
We're talking a vital tool for understanding human diseases.
Really?
Yeah, they're used to study everything from cancer to Alzheimer's, and they've been instrumental in just countless medical breakthroughs.
So not some bizarre attempt to impose human gender identities on rodents then?
Not at all. This case, it really highlights how, emotionally charged language can be used to kind of misrepresent scientific terms.
Oh,
And that ends up creating, fear and distrust in research that is actually very legitimate.
So when we take a closer look at the specific studies that DOGE kind of cherry-picked for their claim,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes even clearer how misleading their narrative is.
Oh, yeah.
So you're saying they kind of twisted the facts to fit their agenda.
I mean, that's a fair assessment. Like, for
Okay.
example, one of the studies they highlighted, it received over $3 million to research asthma.
Asthma.
Yeah, and specifically, they were looking at how hormones influence asthma and why it's more common in women.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, how do they actually study that using mice?
Well, they might expose different groups of mice to different hormone levels and then observe how their lungs react to asthma triggers.
Interesting.
It lets researchers kind of isolate the effects of hormones on the development and the severity of the disease.
Makes sense. So it's all about understanding the role of hormones in human health, not about making mice transgender.
Right.
What were some of the other studies that they misrepresented?
Well, another study, it had a $2.5 million budget and focused on fertility and how it relates to gender and hormones.
Okay.
Again, a totally legitimate area of medical research that is super crucial for understanding, human reproductive health.
Right.
And then they also pointed to a project exploring the impact of gender hormones on the gut microbiome of mice, which, as we're learning, plays a huge role in overall health these days.
So we're seeing a pattern here. They're taking studies that involve hormones and mice and the word gender
Yeah.
and twisting them into something they're not.
Exactly. They even included a study on breast cancer research.
Oh, wow.
But the focus was on the risks for female-to-male transgender individuals taking testosterone.
Okay.
The mice themselves weren't undergoing any kind of gender transition. They were simply a model for studying the effects of hormones on cancer development in humans.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how they can take like legitimate scientific research and turn it into something so misleading.
It really is, yeah. And I think this case really shows how, these tactics can be used to undermine trust in science.
Yeah.
And to kind of advance a specific agenda. But there actually was one study that DOGE mentioned that came a little closer to their claim.
Really?
But still not quite on the mark.
Oh, okay. So tell me more about this one.
Yeah, so this one involved HIV research. And it looked at the immune response of mice that were given cross-hormone therapy.
Okay.
So this is the only study they cited where you could even kind of remotely argue that the mice were exposed to something like a gender transition.
Okay.
But even then, the goal was to understand how hormone levels impacted the immune system's ability to fight off infection,
Right.
not about changing the mice's gender identity.
So even in the study that was closest to their claim, it was still about advancing human health, not about some weird social experiment on mice.
Yeah, and another important point is that this particular study got a pretty small amount of funding, like $455,000.
Yeah.
A far cry from the millions that DOGE claimed were being spent to make mice transgender.
So it sounds like they took a tiny little piece of data and blew it way out of proportion to create a really sensationalized headline.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why, though? Why do you think this kind of misinformation works? What makes people believe these outlandish claims?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on there.
Okay.
One is the emotional side of it.
Mhm.
You know, fear is a huge motivator. And, you know, in this case, the claim about transgender mice, it kind of taps into anxieties that are already out there surrounding gender identity and social change.
Yeah.
And it kind of plays on this idea that there's this threat to traditional values.
Mhm.
And that can make people more likely to believe these claims without even questioning them.
It's like they're just taking advantage of people's fears to, push their own agenda.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is a lot of the time the case.
Yeah.
And I think another reason that this misinformation spreads so easily is that it offers like these simple explanations for really complex issues.
Right.
Scientific research can be really difficult to understand,
Oh, yeah.
especially for people who aren't, familiar with all the terminology or the methods.
It's way easier to understand a catchy phrase like transgender mice than it is to try and figure out all the little details of hormonal research.
Totally. And, we can't forget about the role of social media in all of this.
Yeah.
These platforms are just designed to, make information spread really quickly.
Right.
And that includes, misinformation,
Yeah.
algorithms, and these echo chambers can create these feedback loops where people just keep seeing stuff that already confirms their beliefs, even if those beliefs are based on false information.
So it's like this perfect storm of manipulation and simplification and social media just amplifying it all.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it shows why critical thinking is so crucial nowadays. We got to be able to step back and really look at the information we're taking in and ask ourselves, okay, who is saying this? Why are they saying it? What evidence is there? And are there other perspectives we should be considering?
So it's about being like an active participant.
Yeah.
And, where we're getting information from,
Exactly.
not just taking everything we see at face value.
Right. And this is a big reminder that misinformation can have real-world consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It can affect public policy, influence how people vote, and even erode trust in institutions that are super important for a functioning society.
Oh, yeah.
Like, think about the scientific community. If people don't trust scientists and researchers, it's a lot harder to deal with big challenges like climate change or, a huge public health crisis.
Yeah, it kind of like breaks down the whole foundation of knowledge and progress.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I find interesting is that certain topics like, this whole transgender mice thing,
Right.
they seem extra vulnerable to this manipulation.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a good question. And I think it's because these topics get at people's beliefs and values.
Mm-hmm.
They touch on our sense of identity, how we see the world, where we fit into it all.
So when someone comes along and challenges those beliefs,
Yeah.
even if they don't have any evidence,
Right.
it can cause like a huge reaction.
I know, for sure.
It's not about facts anymore.
Totally.
It's about defending your whole worldview.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so hard to have a productive conversation about this stuff.
Right.
People are coming at it from such different places emotionally.
Yeah, it's like those online arguments where everyone's just yelling.
Everyone's listening.
Yeah, we've all been there.
So how do we break through that? How do we even start to talk about these tough issues without it turning into a shouting match?
Well, I think you got to remember that we're all human.
Yeah.
We've got our own biases and experiences that shape how we see things.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you can approach these conversations with some empathy and a real willingness to understand where the other person is coming from,
Right.
even if you don't agree with them, that can make a big difference.
It's about finding that shared space, where you can both be honest and respect the evidence, even if you disagree.
Exactly, because if you don't have that basic respect and that willingness to listen to other points of view, you're not going to get anywhere.
And the misinformation just keeps spreading.
Oh, yeah. It just keeps going and going.
So to all of you listening out there, we want to leave you with this challenge.
Okay.
Next time you see something that seems crazy or controversial,
right,
or maybe a little too good to be true, take a second.
Take a breath.
Yeah. Just breathe. Don't just react.
Don't just hit share without thinking.
Right. Ask yourself some questions.
Yeah. Where'd this come from? Who's behind it?
Yeah.
What do they want? Do they have any proof?
Yeah.
And are there other perspectives I need to know about?
Exactly. It's so easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles.
Yeah.
With people who think just like us.
Totally.
But we got to get out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
And, see what other people are thinking, even if it makes us feel a little weird.
Yeah, because the best way to protect yourself from misinformation is to be informed and to think critically.
Absolutely. Be involved in the world of information. Don't just sit back and let it wash over you.
That's what the deep dive is all about.
Exactly.
Giving you the knowledge and the tools to understand all this crazy information out there.
You got this.
So keep asking questions.
Keep digging.
Keep challenging what you think you know.
Keep talking to each other.
That's how we all get smarter.
And that's how we make the world a little bit better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of transgender mice and the bigger issue of misinformation.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Stay curious, everyone.
Stay informed and stay engaged.